Hi, my name is James Andrella, and you are listening to the Back the Human podcast. On today's episode, we have our first returning guest, and actually the very first guest of the podcast, Ste Lane. Ste is a creator of the Peak Human Solution, a transformative online holistic coaching program, and also the host of the new radio show, Radical Health Radio. Ste, welcome back, and congratulations on the launch of your new show, brother.
Yeah, thank you, man. It's good to be back, and it's cool to hear that I'm the first return guest. So that either means you're a glutton for punishment, or maybe I do have some interesting takes, and I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, man. No, people really love the first episode, and I really believe that people need to hear what you have to say. I feel like you're very grounded in your message, so definitely want to bring you back on the show, man. What we're going to dive in today is something that we actually touched on during the first episode, which is kind of how men have been robbed of this initiation phase or this transition period where typically there's some type of ritual process to take them from boyhood into manhood, and
Yeah.
how college has kind of taken its place today, and now we have this pseudo man.
Yes.
Yeah, so I definitely want to take a deeper dive into that today because I feel like it's more important than ever.
Mm.
And so today's topic will be, what does it mean to be a man? So before we begin, Steve, what are your pronouns?
Mate, them, lad, the, dude, bro, all of them,
Uh, I like that. So this isn't going to be a conversation similar to Matt Walsh's "What is a Woman?" that documentary. If any of the audience has been listening to that, we're not going to talk about pronouns or genders. This is going to be about what does it mean to be a man in the past, traditionally, and what does it look like now with this pseudo masculinity that I just mentioned. How is this affecting our relationships? How is this affecting us as men? And what is the solution? Maybe we can get into that during this conversation. So,
Big questions, man.
so I'm just going to start it off with a banger. What does it mean to be a man to you, Steve?
What does it mean to be a man to me? To me, it means taking pride, like to have pride in everything that I do, everything that I say, the way I show up, the way that I look. I mean, maybe not with the beard and the bun, but, creating and caring for my personal home first, this body, and then looking after my extended home, which includes my little kingdom of my wife and the animals that we've got here, and my son Jai and my dog, and extending that out again to my communities, extending that out again to the people that I work with in coaching, is just taking pride in all of that. I think is really something that is deeply tied to one's manhood, because men are supposed to really hold integrity with their word, right? You've probably heard people say he's a man of his word. And I think that's taking pride, being the kind of person who does in private what he says he does in public, and matching both of those things up, and really just trying to be a little bit better every day, I think is something that I focus on a lot. And to me, it's leadership. I think being a man is being a leader. Right? I like to think of archetypes a lot of the time, like the king, right? Being that noble king, because we do rule our own little kingdoms, and then our kingdoms if we're in relationships, and especially when we become fathers and such. And archetypes have, the positive and the shadow side of them. And there's a lot of tyrants, and a lot of tyrant kings out there. These are the people that just found themselves in positions of power and become authoritarian, and they bark orders, and they haven't necessarily become the man that deserves that level of respect, but they demand it. Whereas the noble king earns everybody's respect. He realizes it's earned, not given. I'm not the king just because I'm some old-fashioned man and this is my house, so you do as I say. I'm the king because this is my role, and my wife is the queen, and everybody around is the kingdom that we look after, right? And that means I listen to the queen. I love my woman. I listen to the wisdom of my counsel. if it came time to go to war, I'm not going to be the guy in the ivory tower saying, you go and defend this land and hopefully I survive. I'm going to be on the front lines with them. I'm going to lead by example first. And that's me taking pride in who I am, what I say, what I do, how I live. So it's kind of, taking pride, integrity, and being of your word. I think that's something that we can all anchor to as men, because even if everything gets taken away from us, we can hold on to that. I am true to who I am who I say I am, I do what I say I will do, and I'm building on that foundation of self-respect and pride. And I think that's very important.
Mm. So where do you feel like this pride has gone?
Yeah, that's a good question.
What's interrupted the process?
Well, on the last episode and in the intro piece, we touched a little bit on that, the ritual initiation processes that have somewhat been lost in our culture, and they've been replaced with these pseudo initiations that have maybe locked us into this child psychology because we never actually grew up. We are adults now. We might look like adults. We might even have adult jobs and drive adult cars and all of that fun stuff. But psychologically, we're kind of stuck at the level of the child. And if you look at children, they are maturing in their own way, learning how to be in the world, and they need to be told what to think, what to do, and how to act, and they model that. But there's a lot of adults that have also handed over that level of free thinking and sovereignty to outsource, that to other people in the world. And that means that, we have a lot of adults that are actually, childlike in their thinking and their personal responsibility and all of that stuff. And I think that's just a consequence of how the pendulum swings back and forth, back and forth. And currently, how that kind of shows up, I think it's difficult to be a man today because masculinity stands on shaky ground, because you've got a lot of different inputs about what it means and what we're told it should mean. The left will scream that to be a man means being more like your sister, and the right will scream that to be a man means being more like your father. And all of those, both of those actually have some merit. But if we get so trapped in identity politics of what it means to be a man, and we miss this holistic view of finding balance and self-leadership, self-governance, and sovereignty, then I think we just get lost. You've got this one end of the pendulum that is swinging back from the way of our older generations that had such a tough time in life and that had to be very stoic and when fought in wars and died in wars and maybe was a little more closed off from the emotional side of things. And we maybe overcorrected and got a little too soft and got stuck in nice guy territory. And then we bounce back again. You look at a cultural phenomenon right now, like Andrew Tate, he's playing to that crowd, these disenfranchised young men, because he speaks well, he looks well, right? A lot of the stuff he says, we could talk about because I don't agree with everything he says, but I can see why he's a very enticing figure for disenfranchised young men that have been told for the last, decade or so that you need to be nicer and softer and weaker. And on one hand, it's not a bad message in and of itself because there's a shred of truth in everything. But at the same time, if we deny our masculinity because we've been told that masculinity is something that needs to be exercised out of us as this horrible, intrinsic and toxic part of being a man, and we give all that away, then what are we? Right? We're denying the truth of what we are. And then we get stuck in this weird limbo spot because we start to be nice. So we become nice guys. And actually, we don't feel right internally. Women are repulsed by nice guys. So now we swing back again and we go to this kind of manosphere, red pilly, just use women and become a high value man and da da da. And you can see it just bounces back and forth and ping pong. So it's shaky ground. Where am I over here? Am I over here? Don't quite know where to stand. And like anything in life, whether it's political or nutritional dogma or even this conversation, I think the truth sits, largely in the middle, and people just have a hard time being in the middle right now because it's kind of like a no man's land. Because I agree with some of this over here, and I also agree with some of this over here, and maybe we don't need to throw all the baby out with the bathwater. So I think, men are finding themselves in an interesting position where, one aisle is screaming that, masculinity is toxic and bad, and you should do everything you can to stomp that out of you. like James Cameron, the famous director that recently called testosterone a toxin that needs to be eradicated from young men, versus the other extreme, which is like do absolutely anything and everything you can to become this just giga chad testosterone fueled maniac and never sleep and just build 7-figure businesses and fuck bitches and get money and drive Lambos. And you can just see the polar extremes of that, right? So it's a weird spot. And I think a lot of that is because of that loss of initiation, which means we've lost our elders, which means we've lost the path, we've lost our myth as men. And when we lose our myth, culturally speaking and individually speaking, things seem to descend into chaos. And I think at a certain level, we can see that there's chaos playing out right now, collectively, and in our, broader governments, local governments, and also in how we manage ourselves. There seems to be a lot of, chaos. And I think that is part of, it's a symptom of what's going on here with this masculinity crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's really no stability. And if I was to define what it means to be a man, it'd be to be grounded, to set the foundation. I think one of the most important lines I'd ever heard, I was on a company trip and I met what seemed like my brother. Never met him before, but we shared a very similar story. And out of all the discussions that happened over the trip, I remember one line specifically, and it said, "The man leads the woman."
Mm-hmm.
And right now, what I would say now is that when men aren't men, women cannot be women, and this is kind of creating this whole hyper-dependent little group of women that don't need no man. But meanwhile, what they really want would be a man. They want that king. They want the king energy, but they're not going to give it to someone that's acting like a little bitch. That's demanding respect, like you said, but meanwhile, it's not warranted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you just hit something that's really big here, which I want to preface this whole conversation because we need to talk about the role of the feminine in this conversation, because what a lot of this kind of gender conversation is turning into is a competitive one. It's almost positioned in a lot of the mainstream media or the groups that kind of, pigeonhole themselves into these conversations like we're competing with women and it's a battle of the sexes or between the sexes, when I don't see it that way at all. I think we have been collaborative with women for our entire existence. And this idea that, men are the enemy or women are the enemy is just so ludicrous to me. We clearly need each other. We're mutually beneficial. Man and woman, yin and yang, we're designed to go together like steak and eggs. It's a beautiful symbiosis. But this idea that you just said about this ever increasing group of women that are becoming these, boss bitches and competing in the workforce, it's true that they don't need men anymore, but that doesn't mean that they don't want men anymore. And I think that points, I said about men losing the myth a little bit. And I think if you think about how we grew up and the generations that came before us, and even the way it was depicted in our, fairy tales and Disney movies, there was always this damsel in distress that the young prince could go and slay the dragon and save her and live happily ever after. And that's a deeply archetypal thing to the masculine. It's that provider, like you said, that man leads the woman, keeps her safe, provides, and really wants to hold that. There's something deeply kind of archetypical in us that feels good about doing that. Now, all of a sudden, though, the Disney princesses, the damsel in distress in the towers, came down from the tower and got out and escaped, and they don't need to be saved anymore. And it's a very ungrounding place for the masculine, because it's like, oh shit, they don't need us anymore. Like they can work in these corporate environments. They can earn more money than men. They can compete now. In fact, and this is wonderful for women, and I'm certainly not saying that we need to throttle back women, because women are just getting themselves caught up for years of oppression and inability to be in the workforce and education. But on average now, the 18 to 30-year-old woman earns $1,000 more than the man. So a lot of things are overcorrecting. The gender wage gap is closing. Still, globally speaking, men are paid more than women, and they still dominate most of the top positions, especially in corporate America, for example. But that isn't necessarily now due to a lack of access, and more so to the fact that there are actual real differences in gender and how we show up. And it's not a question of are there differences? It is, yes, there are differences. And when will they show up and in what amount? So in that example, typically speaking, again, this is all averages, but men are more interested in things and women are more interested in people. And that means that men in the mid to late 30s and 40s, which is when the average person is ascending to those higher corporate levels, are more interested in things like status, money, and wealth, are more likely to sacrifice the people and relationships to get those things, which means they're more likely to work 60, 70 hours a week, pull all-nighters, whereas women are more interested in relationships. And as they enter into their 30s, the biological clock and the draw to potentially pull into the motherhood role kind of excludes them from that cohort of people anyway. So I'm not sure we're seeing that just because all of the ultra 1% high performers are men, that it means only men can do this. And I think we're actually seeing that at lower levels now and younger. Women are crushing men, dude. They're outperforming us in education astronomically. They're out earning us from 18 to 30 years old. They're a lot smarter. Their brains develop a lot quicker. They're about 2 years ahead of us in terms of the way their prefrontal cortex forms. And that's at its peak difference at about the age of 16. Now, if you remember who you was as a young boy at 16 years old, it's very immature. It's very likely when you're about to commit stupid mistakes and do things that are not well thought out. And women are just so impressive in so many ways that men aren't. But because that has happened and overcorrected so quickly, it's become very destabilizing for men. And they're kind of sitting in this position of like, oh shit, they really don't need us. They don't need me to earn X amount of money and just put her in a position where she can be a stay-at-home mom, because maybe she wants to compete in the workforce. And this is very challenging to the very core of who we are. And that's why men in relationships with women who out-earn them, those relationships are much more likely to end in divorce. And in relationships where the woman is the sole breadwinner of the family and the man is put in a position of being just the stay-at-home toy boy or the stay-at-home dad, something like 3 times as likely to need to use erectile dysfunction medication. And that's probably because there's something going on at a psychological level which feels like my entire manhood is being questioned, because my role, as it's been since antiquity, is no longer the real dominant myth and the real story that I can hold on to. But just because, and I'll say it again, just because women don't need men anymore does not mean that they don't want them. Of course they want them, dummy, right? Of course they do. Just like we want good women, women want good men. But you're right, these increasingly powerful, strong, independent women are not going to settle for these immature, weak little boys. And the gap is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's creating quite a turbulent environment and a very large cohort of disenfranchised young men and increasingly empowered women who are going to come full circle and be disenfranchised themselves because there's no men to support them on that wonderful lifestyle and share that with them, because we're not catching up at the same rate,
It's like we've been sold the wrong thing, and we just keep buying into certain things, like you said, that just aren't really serving us deep in our core as men. So we think that this is doing something. We think that it's going to be, we're going to be able to impress women, but that's really not what they're interested in, like the things and whatever it may be, the materialistic possessions. They can help themselves now. And I like that you said how a relationship is not competitive. It should not be competitive. It's collaborative, especially like the right relationship. Things will flourish. Your kingdom will flourish.
Yes.
And what I like to picture it as is, okay, if you're gardening, the foundation would be the soil. And this may be backwards because we have Mother Nature. But just the way that I imagined in my head is like, okay, well, if the soil is fertile, if the soil is good, if you have a great foundation, now everything that you put on that, you plant the seeds, your harvest is going to be grand. It's going to be
Hmm.
huge. But if
Hmm.
it's not, if it's shaky, then guess what? You're not going to really be able to produce anything. And I want to go back to when you actually mentioned Andrew Tate and how, okay, he has this hyper masculinity message that he's putting out. And okay, there's probably some good things in there.
Mm.
It seems like to me, ultimately, is that, and I've never followed him. I've never watched a single video of his. I'm just being completely honest. I don't know the guy. But people are looking for a daddy. Men specifically seem like they're looking for a daddy.
Hmm.
So where has that father figure gone?
Hmm.
I feel like that's what we need now more than ever is people to really show up specifically as fathers, whether you have children or not. We need a father figure. It's
Hmm.
important than ever. And then that would go into the nuclear family. So we're at kind of like this crisis, and I know you got some interesting stats, but we really need to bring it back to what it means to be a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, please.
sorry, I actually wanted to ask you because I know you've traveled a lot more than I have. Do you see this in other countries, specifically, I guess, in Asia, because I'm pretty sure that you went backpacking and everything through there? Or is this more of a Western thing?
It's almost certainly more of a Western thing. Yeah, we have what we call weird countries. Those are Western, industrialized, economically something. And it's that combination of like the developed West. So you're thinking like Europe, America, the UK, etc. These seem to be emerging problems because maybe this is just the cost of progress. And again, I'm not saying we need to walk things back and deny progress because progress is progressing. Like again, the thing is the reason this dichotomy is occurring between men and women and this weird mating relationship thing that's going on right now is because women have finally caught up to the ability of access that men have always had. So the solution here is to not throttle women down and say, all right, yeah, we got to take them back out of education and put them in the homes. That's archaic. But it points at something where there's unintended consequences sometimes with progress, right? There's an old saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Or Gabor Mate said it recently where he said the road to hell is paved with a lack of intention, which means we're not really thinking about what these things mean when they actually play out. Right. And when we basically just flip the script of the way things have been for a long time, and just because things have been a certain way for a long time doesn't mean that they need to be that way forever. But it's going to shake the core of like what is going on at a cultural and societal level. And again, for men, that's this loss of the thread of meaning, because all of a sudden we kind of become disposable. The role of the man feels to a lot of people redundant. The role of the father feels to a lot of people redundant. I don't think it could be further from the truth, but that feeling is alive in people and it's causing men to suffer from a crisis of just despondency, a lack of hope. And I think this is why men kill themselves 3 times more than women do, right? 3 times more likely to commit suicide than women do. And this is a crazy stat from my home country in England. Suicide is the number one killer of men under 45 years of old. Men under 45 years of age, the number one killer is suicide. Like that's not nothing. It really points at something and it points at desperation, I think. And what you could look at this in a couple of ways because on one hand, from an evolutionary perspective, you'd expect that lack of desperation to just bring out some anger and rage and this you just have a bunch of these angry sexless men that are not felt like they're seen anymore, that have a very hard time being vulnerable and working on their mental health because it's a core wound internally. Gabor Mate again said that where the word vulnerability comes from is actually it comes from the word wound, and vulnerability means to be able to be wounded, to be willing to be wounded. And men don't want to be willing to be wounded by showing that they are weak and saying, I need help. Men are not very forthright with the acknowledgement that they're struggling. I'm depressed, I'm despondent, I'm anxious, because our entire lives we've been told to just fucking suck it up and get on with it and be strong. And there's a lot of value in that message. But what happens when just fucking suck it up and get on with it, be strong, and I don't feel strong, and I can't suck it up, and I can't get going, and I don't have that role model, and we've lost our fathers, and there's nothing there. Well, now I just feel increasingly useless because everything that I should be, I don't feel like I am. Right. But this comes back to the point again, in the past, that might have been like, well, this is going to cause this, angry bunch of reckless youths out there kind of smashing up shops and pushing over granny. But it doesn't seem to be that case, right? It seems to be that we're going now, because of a world of comfort, more into passivity. Like men are just going towards numbing, essentially. So one of the facts that I have here is that men between the age of 18 and 30 play an average of 2,000 hours of video games per year, which is shocking enough, but over 50% of those men that are playing video games for 2,000 hours per year, over 50% are doing it on prescription medications for pain or anxiety or smoking weed. So we've got just this enormous checkout culture now, this pain that I'm sitting with as a man, where I'm questioning literally what's even the point of my existence. Women don't need us anymore. Masculinity is toxic. The only giga chads that are on the website are slaying just girls left, right, and center and driving Bugattis. And I live in my mom's basement. So I'm just going to take painkillers. I'm going to smoke weed. I'm going to play video games. And that eventually will eat away and decay a person's soul. And that is exactly why men are 3 times more likely to commit suicide. And another thing that we're suffering from here is, the father thread and this wise elder kind of story and this wisdom keeping in our tribes is gone. But we're also suffering a deep loneliness crisis because we don't really have friends. It's incredible, the statistics on male friendships, right? 15% of all men say that they now have no close friends. 15% doesn't sound like a crazy number, but that's millions and millions and millions of men. They say they don't have any friends. That number is up from just 3% of men that said they had no friends in 1990. So it's astronomically higher. And all of these trends are only growing, right? Now, back to the 1990s, about half, it was 45% of men reported that when they were in crisis, they would reach out to a friend for help. Today, that number of men that say they would reach out to a friend for help when they're in crisis is just 20%. So we've gone from half of men saying, like, you know what, I'm really struggling and I need to reach out to a mate, to now 20% of men that are only willing to do that. An ever increasing number of men that are getting ever increasingly lonely and desperate with nowhere to turn. And they can't turn to the father, like you said, because there's a fatherless crisis. They've not grown up. They haven't grown up with this instilled in them. We're also suffering a single mom crisis where fathers are running around and not taking responsibility for where they stick their meat and then running off when the going gets tough because there's a baby on the way. 84% of kids that are raised now to a single parent are raised by the mom, and the dad's not even in the picture. Like, how destabilizing is it for that? Like, that man has no role model. There's nothing in culture left anymore. So all of this is just creating this perfect storm for this hopelessness, this crisis that's absolutely happening, this rising tide of depression and suicide and despondency, because we're standing again on that shaky ground where it's okay and prosperous and very fruitful for a few men. The top 20%, let's say, they are crushing because the bottom 80% are getting trampled on further and further and further. So it's quite crazy and quite scary in a sense, because all of these trends don't show any real signs of slowing down. They are just ramping up. And that makes you wonder, like, where does this stop? Where does it hit like critical mass? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you ever viewed the Universe 25 thing that I sent you, the video, but it's essentially it's very scary because what it's doing is, there's this rat study, just for the audience. This rat study, this guy sent up like this utopia, and eventually what happens with overcrowding is you see exactly what's happening with our society today. And I want to touch on what you said because that actually really rang true for myself. We don't have the father figure, so we don't have any guidance. And then we don't have a safe space as a man. What I've had to learn to do is I need my man cave. I need my isolation. I need my space. However, yeah, if shit was to hit the fan, honestly, I would only have a very select few people that I would ever feel like reaching out to. And there was a time when I was going through it, and I had to bring myself out of the mud by myself, pretty much. So thank God I had the strength in order to do so, because I don't know where I would be had I not. I may be another statistic. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, we're in a really, really sticky situation right now, man.
Yeah. It's very isolating and lonely for a lot more people than I think people realize. I'm sure that there are men that are going to be listening to this that feel this. And I bet you would be surprised at other men in your life that you think are just doing great and thriving, that actually, if you got under the facade of this I'm all good bro mentality, that you'd see that there's a deeply lonely person in there, because it's not just afflicting, a small percentage of men. It's kind of, systemic now. It's kind of ingrained its way into the way in which we live. And well, that loneliness will lead to trying not to feel lonely, right? And what's another huge elephant in the room when we talk about men and their addictions and their checking out? It's pornography. What is that? That's an attempt to not feel lonely. That's a need. It's not being met, because I've got to remember, by the way, sexless men are higher now than they've ever been. I know on one hand, we look out at culture and we think there's debauchery everywhere and everyone's just out there having sex and one night stands. But that's not what the statistics say. People are having less sex now than ever before. Again, except for that tip of the iceberg Giga Chad, who basically have access to the entire market. And because they do, and they're not really wired to treat that with the respect and reverence it deserves, they leave a wake of broken hearts in the kind of chaos. And that leaves women more angry at men. But this other bunch of men, they're sexless, they're angry, they're lonely, they turn to pornography. And that's never really going to do it, right? You can never get enough of something that almost works. So for that 6 or 7 minutes of debauchery and pleasure, you now start to feed into that dopamine system. You start to scratch that itch a little bit, but it will never fix it completely. But that is why there's another crazy stat for you here. Pornhub is one of the biggest pornography sites used, and it gets 694 million visits per month. And to put that into perspective, Netflix gets about 540 million visits per month. And Zoom, where people work now, gets about 600 million visits per month. So Pornhub is smashing Netflix and Zoom. That's how much porn is being watched. Is it all men? No, but I bet it's 98% men that are on that site, and they are going there because they're desperately lonely. And then the other things, the drinking, the food, the weed, and it quickly becomes a downward spiral, right? It quickly becomes something that reaches a point where it feels like you can't turn the tide back. Now, of course, that's not the message. Everything can be reversed. I think one of the biggest problems that we have going on is that people are unaware of some of these challenges, maybe even in themselves. There might even be men listening to this that are like, shit, I didn't even see it like that, because it's been baked into the cake of modern culture. But until you become aware of something, you cannot change it. And you cannot escape a prison that you do not know you're in. So conversations like this, hopefully, shining the flashlight of awareness onto bigger problems and saying like, hey, listen, right? You're the only one that has the key. We're not going to change the world. We're not going to reverse the way in which women choose mates. We're not going to do any of that. All you can do is take personal responsibility and start to work through this. And even that becomes a triggering message, because personal responsibility is toxic positivity. And that's easy for you to say, and you're a white man and da, da, da. But that's all we've got, man. That is all we've got. Because if you're not that, you're the victim. And if you're waiting for somebody to come and save you, you've become the damsel in distress as the guy. How does that feel? You want to be coming saved? No, you don't. That's not what you want to do. You want to save yourself, and you got to do it.
Very well said, man. Absolutely very well said. It's like, okay, there's these problems, but we've been provided the easy solution. So rather than taking any type of self-responsibility or accountability, people, as you say, are kind of just numbing out one way or another. And awareness is always definitely the first step in order to fix a problem. So if you are a young male listener out here, I would highly suggest that you quit porn. This is something that I've had to deal with in the past myself, and I can tell you it did not lead to any better relationships. Right? Yeah, we need more sexed men. We need more people having sex, period. Otherwise, I don't
Bro.
want to be in the future.
I'll just say, if there's a tagline or shirts need to be printed or something, it would be along the lines of like, porn kills love. That's it. The end. Porn kills love. Real love. Not the fake love. Not you being a voyeur, watching other people get it on, becoming a cuck or any of that weird shit. Porn kills love. get off it. Get off it and reinvest that energy back into making yourself better. Because guess what? If you make yourself better, you could be the guy in that video, right? You could be out there connecting with real women. But you can't do it if you just keep doing what you've always done. You'll get what you've always got. And guess what? Time is magnifying and it won't get easier. Got to take your power back over these things because they will own you if you do not own them.
Save your seed. And I like that you touched on that because it would seem almost motivational if, yeah, the top giga chads, as you like to call them, are getting the bounty of women. They can literally pick from whoever they want because they're at the top. You can get there too if you really wanted to. I don't know if you'd want to live that Dan Bilzerian type lifestyle. I think it's a little bit hollow. I don't know him personally, so I can't really say. But me personally, I would know that I don't think there's anything better than coming home to a hug and a kiss from Jade and seeing my son. That is
Yeah,
extremely
man.
rewarding.
You know what's super interesting to me about that point is that you'll see a lot of the old timer folks from the manosphere kind of red pill movement. They came up in the pickup artistry days, and the whole thing was about basically playing this game, becoming an NPC to, play a character, get the women. Because for the longest time, I think a lot of those men, as we all have to go through this phase, we basically think that just being out there, being the Giga Chad and drowning in abundance of women is going to make us happy. But what happens to a lot of those men, and you'll see it now in these men, they kind of come full circle. They now, all of them are family men, and these big names, they own ranches, they become religious or spiritual. And it's interesting, right? Because if you have never experienced that, you have this zyganic kind of desire to have to go through it because you're like, oh yeah, it sounds totally miserable, dude, to be like earning $1 million and just out there partying and slanging dick. But the people that have got there will often say, hey, the view from the top of that mountain wasn't that great. And there's something else that all of them seem to crave and come back to, which is, guess what? Kind of looks like history, kind of looks like the way we've been doing it for a long time, which is meaning in a healthy relationship. And in most cases, parenthood and becoming, a part of that family again and having that meaning. And it's so much richer than that other stuff. So look, we all have to do it, right? We have to go through, I think it's part of growing up. We kind of have to go through our fuckboy phase and we have to basically play that game. It reminds me of a Naval quote. I like Naval a lot. Naval Ravikant, for anybody that's curious, is a really smart and wise guy, but he said it's much easier to achieve your material desires than it is to renounce them. And you can apply it to this level of thinking. It's somewhat easier, to your point, James, to become the Giga Chad, to get really strong and healthy and, confident and go out and, spend a couple of years really working on yourself because you might not be the best looker in the world, but you can become a man of status. You can work your way up the ladder. You can do all of these things, and you could then go and have your conquest and become bloody Genghis Khan if you wanted to realize that, oh, it actually didn't do it. But it's easier to say it didn't do it for me once you've been there than it is to say down here as the person that's, 250 pounds in his mom's basement saying like, yeah, again, that's easy for you guys to say. I would die for that. But there's the invitation. You could try to go for that at the very least. The worst thing that happens is you try and you fail. And I guarantee you're going to feel better if you try and you fail than if you don't do anything about it. And then you become angry at the world. You become angry at women. You become angry at these other men. You become angry and angry and angry. And it just eats you alive. You drink poison every day and expect it to hurt people in the outside world. And the only person it hurts is you.
It's like the pendulum's got to swing, but eventually it comes to a stop. Yeah, and you're somewhere in the middle. So it's like a compensatory thing. And I think it could probably be avoided if we had better guides, if we had that ritual process. It'd be like, hey, this is what men do.
No
So
doubt.
to rewind a little bit and go back to the safe space as a guy and how we don't really have a lot of friends that we can reach out to, men, because I don't believe that you should be going to your woman with all your problems. Eventually, that's going to lead to a lot of resentment and probably not the most successful relationship. I speak from personal experience. So, what would you say is a good way for guys to be vulnerable instead of like keeping all this stuff internalized because it's just going to get worse. They're going to rot from the inside out. You got to let this stuff go, but you need that safe space. So going forward, how would you say that men should deal with their emotions?
It's a very good question, and I think it exists on a few levels depending on where someone is at. But I think the foot in the door for all of this is back to that idea of personal responsibility first. We can worry about our environment and the people we spend time around and the safe spaces in a minute, but if you're not first, at least just saying, this is just how it is. I'm either going to sit here and be victimized by my situation and say, poor me because of X, Y, and Z, or I'm going to say, yeah, actually, this does fucking suck. Maybe I do have a shitty situation. Maybe I only have one leg, whatever it is. But what am I going to do with that now? What am I actually going to do? How am I going to take responsibility for what I do from this point forward? Not everything that happened to you was your fault. The world can be cruel sometimes, but everything that you do from this moment forward is a choice, and you have to take responsibility for that. And then again, back to taking pride, taking integrity, and, building some sense of a foundation of becoming the kind of person that can keep a promise to themselves, because as a man, your word is your bond, and you need to have some integrity around that. Now, what I would say about finding those spaces first, and the reason I preface that with that is a person that's not willing to take responsibility and at least own some of their shit is never going to go and find other men that are doing that, because they're not that common. And it's not because men don't want it. It's because, again, this facade of, well, whatever, bro, I'm all good. I don't need that. The only dudes I hang out with are so we can, watch the football. I'll talk about how great that girl's ass is. And it's so surface level because men are clearly suffering, and often they're suffering in silence. But the good news is more people are kind of waking up to this, if you will. There are groups starting for this, or there are just good men in certain places because you only find certain kind of individuals in certain places. So I think curating your environment is very important, because you can adopt the values of your environment if you spend enough time around it. So if you want to become, stronger, for example, go hang out where men get strong. You're not going to find men that are getting strong in, video arcades, right? You're going to go to the jiu-jitsu gyms or the CrossFit gyms or the park where people are working out on the weekend or whatever that is. If they're into that, they're likely into some of these other things as well. And it becomes a little snowballing effect of like, oh, maybe there's like a little men's group or something. And if not, why don't you start it? Why don't you just start with one dude and you put a post on the Facebook group that says, hey, I'm starting a men's group in the park every Sunday. And we're just going to connect and we're going to talk about whatever, and we're going to set some healthy goals, and we're going to challenge each other a little bit. And all of a sudden you'll see that those things kind of grow and grow and grow because people want it. But if not now, when? And if not you, who? And it seems that everybody is just sitting back waiting for other men to do it instead of stepping into the fullness of their masculinity, which is to be a leader and say, shit, it's me, and it's now or never. If I don't do it, I can't expect anybody else to do it. And maybe you get lucky and somebody does, and you end up in the right crowd, and you can just search a men's group, and you're in a city and you're like, oh shit, there's loads of them. And you just get involved, like get stuck in, go. But chances are it's not there. And chances are that means that there's an opportunity, and that's only an opportunity that can be filled by you, because otherwise you'll wait. And maybe someone will do it in 5 years. But in that 5 years, how many people could have been served by what you create, and how much better would you be instead of waiting 5 years of just the messy action of saying like, yeah, I got to do something about this, So take that personal responsibility, go to the kind of environments where the people you want to be like hang out, and start to let that kind of consume you and become that. We are extensions of our environments. If you want to be around successful, strong people, go be where the successful, strong people be. And then find this other part, this vulnerability piece in these other groups or in these spaces or online programs or whatever it is, but find it, you must, because if you don't, you will kind of bleed onto everybody else in your environment. And there's a time and a place for vulnerability, even ultimate vulnerability with your romantic partner. But to your point, James, like if you're just bottling it all up and then cracking when the dam breaks and you're spilling it all over into your home, it's very destabilizing to that feminine relationship. You're asking her to step up and be the support system. And every once in a while, that's okay. But you do that enough, You're going to depolarize the relationship. You're going to become this tender little thing that your woman has to hold, and that's not going to be good for the long-term trajectory of that. So I think you need to find this. You need to find it. And the last point is, you can move some of this out. You can literally move it out of you. You can exercise it out of you. You can punch it out of you. You can scream it out of you. You can go and like work out like a madman. You can become a savage. You can do all of these things. They can be extremely helpful. And something that I heard Trevor Bone say a long time ago, just stuck and hit such a deep chord with me, is become become dangerous but not a danger, right? Become dangerous but not a danger. What he's saying is like, go learn how to fight, go learn to do Muay Thai, go learn to do jiu-jitsu, go put yourself in an amateur boxing ring and learn what it's like to actually engage in combat. And remember, like, shit, we did this for like a lot of our evolution, because the more competent you get in the realm of physical and verbal violence, like your ability to speak, your ability to protect the people around you, the more safety you create for everyone around you. And I can speak to this from first-hand experience. I've been a martial artist for a long time of my life. I'm decently competent in skills of violence. And the more violent people get in the gym, in terms of their ability to literally kill you with the bare hands, the nicer they become, the safer they make everybody around them, and the confidence just exudes off them in not an arrogant way. They're not walking around all Billy Big Dick, with the carpets rolls under the arms like, oh, rah, rah. Those people are little boys, they're the boy psychology in the bar at, 12 o'clock on a Friday night looking for a fight. These are men. They grew up and they sharpen their sword around other men. And it's funny because in those places where you expect to find the toughest, meanest dude, you'll often find the most willing to be vulnerable, because they're strong and they've gone through the fires and they've bled and they've fought and they've put themselves out there. And that to me is really the warrior mentality. It's not just the sword and the battle and the I have no fear. It's all of it. It's the willingness to fully step into the kind of the proving ground or the battleground of opening your heart a little bit too and saying, hey, you know what? I need some fucking help here. So I would say those are some tips that anybody could benefit from pretty much at any time on the journey of becoming a more full man, which is hopefully a journey that we're on until the day we die. It doesn't just stop when you hit 30 or 40. You just keep going and then you pass it on.
I could definitely second the martial arts helping, both just with like discipline, movement. I love moving in those specific ways, especially barefoot. And I remember when I was a kid, teenager, I got my black belt, so I did martial arts as well. And there was always this rumor that once you get your black belt, that you have to like register your hands as a deadly weapon. I don't know if that was actually true. I don't think so, but yeah, I don't feel like going around and beating everyone's ass, like just because they tested me. If anything, I laugh when people get some type of road rage and they're honking because the person in front of them didn't jump at the first sign of the green light. Like, stuff's funny to me. So could definitely second getting into those environments. And I remember someone actually reached out to me, one of my followers. She mentioned that her life really changed once she started to immerse herself in a new environment. She'd never seen these things before. And it was a huge jump contrary to what she was doing before. So even if you do have friends that you feel like you can reach out to, is like, how are they really doing too? What behaviors are they involved in? And is this just superficial talk, as you mentioned before? It's like,
that's a huge point, man.
Are you really getting to the core, the root, the deep problems? Can you have these deep conversations with the men that you're surrounding yourself with? If not, you might need to go to a different place.
Yes. It reminds me of the fifth monkey effect. You are the sum of the five people you spend the most time around. Now, I don't think it's a hard and fast rule indefinitely for everybody's life, but there's definitely some truth in that. And again, you have to look at your friends groups. If those five people you're spending time around all the time are just blaming and complaining and playing victim to the world and getting drunk and eating shit and, trying to start trouble and, talking crap about girls and you name it, if they're in that space, you become that space because you absorb the values of your environment. So you must change your environment, and you can be loyal and all of that stuff. But sometimes that means being loyal to yourself and say, no, I got to love you guys from afar for a little bit, because, just smoking an ounce of weed every weekend and playing video games and then complaining about how shit life is ain't really doing it for me anymore. And I've got to find another group of people that are on some other shit, some shit that's about improvement and growth and responsibility. And let's just try and get better because that's all we've got. So yeah, you have to take a look at your environment, man, in terms of not just your physical environment, but who are your friends and how are they showing up? Because you'll become them, you'll become a kind of amalgamation of all of them and what you do. So that's a very good point.
They are your mirrors. And like you said, the first step really is being able to look yourself in the mirror and take self-responsibility and accountability before you go just burden everyone else with your problems, because everyone has their problems too. So be able and willing to look in the fucking mirror. Honestly, probably one of the hardest things you do. I've done it before. Literally just stare and look like, who am I? And am I proud of this? If
Mm.
not, hopefully you don't take the desperation route, because there is a way out. Change your life, change your situation, change your environment, get new friends, people that you want to, who would serve as like role models too. Oh man, love it. So as a man, how would you say to start developing your kingdom? So you want to attract your queen, you want to attract your lover. What would you say is the best way to go about this? Do you chase?
Yeah, you don't do that. You don't chase. That energy of chasing is pretty energetically repulsive, I think. And look, if you want to attract a queen, then make yourself a worthy king. That's a simple way of saying it. And you don't even need to add too much to that, because everybody knows when they really sit and get honest with themselves what that best version of themselves, that in that kind of divine expression of a kingly energy would be. They would be strong and healthy and vibrant and confident, shoulders back, chest open, head held high. They would be taking responsibility for everything they do in their life. They wouldn't be just, debauchery and booze and sex and drugs and rock and roll every weekend, into the 30s. They'd be growing up, they'd be settling down, they'd be thinking about what it means to, build some more deep inherent meaning into their lives. So I always start with physicality, because I think it's the best foot in the door for men. We can understand it well. It's pretty simple to start, but it's this idea of, if nothing else right now and you can't figure where to go and it's overwhelming, is make yourself as healthy as you can possibly be. Strong and healthy, because I believe that health is wealth. And I can tell you that what the culture tells you is wealth, which is cars and money and yachts and crazy salaries, is okay and nice if that's what you want, but it isn't truly wealth. And those people spend an awful lot of money later on trying to buy back their youth and buy back their health, because they abdicate responsibility to that early on. What really is wealth is health, because it affords you so much more life. And there's a surprising little thing that happens when you start to become your healthiest version of yourself. The kind of relationships that you want to have actually start to show up in your life. The kind of career opportunities that you want actually start to show up in your life, because to become a healthy person in a world that wants you sick means that you've got to develop a lot of very virtuous and noble character traits, like self-control and discipline and delayed gratification. And I think that if you want to be successful, you have to master delayed gratification. What that means is the more you can delay gratification, the more successful you'll be. If you can delay gratification for a week, you're not going to be that successful. If you can delay it for a few months, you'll be more so. If you can delay gratification for a year and you can just put in the work and delay the fruits of that labor until then, you'll be successful. I heard Alex Hormozy say that if you can delay gratification for 10 years, you'll be rich and wealthy. If you can delay gratification indefinitely until after you have expired, that's when you can change the world. And I think it's a really empowering frame to look through. And that means, not being so beholden to the hedonic treadmill of, the booze, the food, the porn, the checking out, the video games, because every time you do that, and it's okay to do them sometimes, man. I'm not like this strict agent, like never do it ever again. But I think it's really powerful to micro-dose monk mode. Go monk mode for 30 days. No booze for 30 days. No porn for 30 days. Whatever it is, just try it. Just give yourself that 30 days. Don't say, all right, I'm off it all forever, indefinitely. It's too much. Do 30 days, see how you feel. When you feel it at 30 days, you're gonna be like, oh shit, yeah, I love this. We'll do it for another 30 days. It becomes a year overnight because you just gave yourself that little microdose monk mode. But you got to start something. And that to me is the most low-hanging fruit place to start, because even if you're struggling financially and stuff, you don't need access to a gym to get strong. You can get hella strong with your body weight and go into the park and dips and pull-ups and push-ups and sprinting and getting your bare feet in the grass, and just becoming that new person and exuding that will start to open up doors that otherwise will remain closed if you do not do it.
It's like magnetism. You're bringing into this world exactly who you are as a person.
Yes.
Like, as you said, your quality of relationships are going to improve. You'll get rid of all the superficial stuff. You won't, in my opinion, worry just about the physicality of things. Like, you'll see a little bit deeper. You'll want a deeper connection. So what if a girl's hot? So what if there's this Insta girl that has her OnlyFans?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the depth of the relationship there? Who knows? And that's honestly what I did. I did about 2 years. I found myself in a deep, dark pit, decided to pull myself out of it, and I just focused on self-improvement. I probably bought every damn self-help book. I don't know if I would go back and do the same thing. I think I spent a little bit too much time on the self-help books instead of actually taking action, which is really what helped. Just doing. And I literally wrote up on a goal board. It's like, these are my goals. And at the bottom of it, and nowhere on it, was women.
Yeah.
I had to go in monk mode. I had to deprive myself a little bit. I had to delay gratification, and look where that got me. I'm probably in the best relationship that I've ever been in my life.
Yeah. Amen, brother.
So work on yourself. Physicality, I definitely second that. And now on the flip side, because we definitely have to talk about this, for women that are interested in attracting their king, and more specifically, the hyper independent women that are absolutely crushing it. You would be the breadwinner. You pretty much are killing in every other area of your life. How does a woman get into a relationship not with this masculine core, let herself down a little bit so she can receive, and not have to wait around for these fuck boys or for these boys to turn into men, without going to late 40s where they can no longer bear children? So how can we fix it now?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, you obviously have to preface this through the lens of, I can't even imagine what it would be like to be a woman in the dating market currently. Firstly, also I was thinking about this the other day when I was like growing up, when I was like a teenager. If somebody was on a dating app, they were kind of a weirdo, right? They were kind of like a loner. Now everybody's on dating. That's how people meet now. And it's just, it's so interesting because a lot of this kind of dating crisis data is pulled from the dating apps because this is the largest cohort of people we've got in one place, and it examines kind of trends that are happening. And this idea that these giga chads, again, have ample access to basically most of the women is from these apps. What you've got is 80% of women competing for the top 20% of men. And that's represented in certain things like, big salaries. And this is a funny one, but the whole, got to be over 6 foot thing, because women, just if you are listening to this, that's about 4% of the US population, if I'm not wrong. So if you need a guy to be over 6 foot, you are massively limiting your available cohort. And imagine being so superficially attached to an idea that a guy's got to be over 6 foot to turn away good prospects that are 5'8" or 5'9" like me, right? It's so silly. And then you get into these, got to be over 6 foot, got to be earning over 6 figures, right? This seems to be this thing that women have in their head to match, but that is about, I think it's 2.5% of the US population. So you now got to think about what that actually means and where you live, and your access is this big. So in a sense, it's a very confronting conversation, because on one hand, you're like, well, maybe you just need to lower your standards. But that's not a solution. Why are you going to lower your standards, right? It's not like good on women for not lowering their standards, but it's tricky. And I think it's only going to get a little more confusing because women have a lot of power in this game too, because they essentially hold the keys to sexual intimacy, right? Like it's ultimately the woman that decides that in a relationship. And they set the bar for that. And maybe the bar is coming down a little bit, and you could argue whether that's a good thing or not. But we can't really reject the idea that women pretty much hold the keys. And if they are going to kind of wield that power, that I think they must be very careful with it, because you have to remember that if you're this woman that's in this 80% cohort shooting for the Giga Chad 20%, that this man up here has access to 80% of the dating pool. And unless he has done his work and sorted his shit out, he is going to use it and lose it. And he's going to burn through women on women on women. And he's going to make you feel like a fucking princess and a queen and all of that stuff, take you on fancy dates, talk to you about his $250,000 salary. And he's handsome with a chiseled jaw and 6'2" and ripped. And he's going to be, not able to really handle that level of options, because as men, we're pretty fucking stupid, like if you give a man that much access and he's not really done the work and he's not really anchored to that woman and gave over his full commitment, it's going to be very hard for him to make good decisions. And this is what's happening. I think this is another battle of the sexes thing that's turning some women against men in that case, because they've been used and abused by those people. But you've also got don't forget that top 20% of men is 20% of men. So what's happening here in what we call the bottom 80%? That means there's still a lot of fucking good men there. There's a lot of good men there. And again, I don't know what the solution is here, because I'm certainly not going to tell you to lower your standards, but I might encourage you to assess whether your standards are based in reality or they're based in things that have been perpetuated in culture. Like, again, the ridiculous, like 6 foot, 6-figure thing. Give your heads a wobble. Ladies, if you're only willing to date a man who's over 6 foot and over 6 figures, I don't know what to tell you. You better be a fucking 9.9 with all of your shit sorted out too. And if you're not, dial it back a little bit and be more sensible, because men will be ruthless if you're not. And you have to be willing to know that you're playing that game. Now, I think that hopefully men are starting to, pick up their responsibility in this game, because there's a lot of men that don't take responsibility for their actions, and they're out for that instant gratification, and they just want to copulate and do all the fun stuff. And we need to be better than that. We really do. And I don't know what women should do, honestly, man. I think they should be very clear on their values, and start now. If I was a single woman right now and I was looking for a mate, I would be getting crystal clear on what it is that I want in a life partner, not just to have some fun. I would be mapping out how that person allows me to feel when I am around them, what kind of life I can co-create with them. I would be having the hard, honest conversations on the table on day one. Do you want kids? What's your stance on vaccination? Where do you lie politically? All of that stuff, because I'm not saying things can't be resolved if you've got two dimorphic poles, but it's going to be hard on certain things, like these 20% Giga Chad people. If they want a woman that's going to become the stay-at-home mom, and you're now this boss bitch in the workplace, you're 35 years old, you're like, I ain't being no mom, my career is more important to me. There's not even any point sitting down with these people, because your values are so inherently different. What's the point? Because the best case scenario here is that you have some fun and nobody's heart gets broken, and the worst case scenario is you get used and abused. He puts another notch on his bedpost and you just end up feeling like you got ran through. So get very, very, very clear on what you want. Very clear on what you want, because this dating market is a very interesting place. And really sit with yourself and ask honest, hard questions about, do you want to be a mom? Do you want that? What kind of partner is going to support you on that? Not just financially, but energetically and spiritually, and who they are as a person, and come full circle, like where you started, how you create that fertile soil. Is that man that right person for you? Because you don't want to settle in something like a relationship. I truly believe if it ain't a fuck yeah, it's a hell no, and you got to get out of there.
Yeah, and just to your point, it makes no sense for women to lower their standards or try to meet at this neutral ground if they're already there. If anything, that should,
No.
as I said before, it should motivate men. Just like, I really need to be on my shit.
Yes. Yes.
And as you said, just be more transparent right out of the gate. I know I've seen like plenty of memes. It's like, oh, are you vaccinated on these Tinder apps or whatever like that? And then they'll just block them immediately.
Right.
It's funny to me, but yeah, you need to be on the same page. And I guess my spin on this would be very, very simple. It's write down what you value, write down exactly what you want.
Yes.
About 4 years ago or so, I wrote down what I wanted in a relationship. I wanted what I wanted in my career. I pretty much wrote down everything. And
Yeah.
now I didn't look at it for a while, but if I was to go back in there, which I have, to a T, exactly.
Yes.
So write it down. And Jade did the same exact thing. She
Yes.
wrote constantly. I was in her journal. I was in her diary very, very frequently. So write it down. Write down what you want. Take the time to sit down and establish your values.
Yes.
And if you're going on Tinder or these dating profiles and you just get like a superficial glimpse of that, go deeper. Don't
Yeah.
be afraid to, I guess, I don't want judge is not really the right word here that I want to use because that's pretty harsh. But if it's not what you want, don't mess around. Don't waste anyone else's time because
Yeah.
you're going to run out of time. So that would be my advice. Write it down. Write down exactly what you want to a T because, as you say in your coaching, you can't hit a target that you can't see.
Yes. Yes.
So where are you
And if
aiming?
you allow me to, wax poetic here in a bit of a spiritual and woo-woo sense, there's something very important about writing stuff down because you're making it real. And when we use words, or words as an extension of our hand, we are somewhat creating magic. Like what you and I are doing right now is these noises and vibrations that come out of our mouths and say things that are stuck in here and hopefully form some sense of coherent rambling. And that actually activates something in somebody else. And it's magic. And I think that's why we call it spelling, right? When we write out words, we spell. I think we're casting spells in a literal sense. When we write something down, we cast the spell to create some sense of moving that into reality. We call it intention, right? And think about that word. It becomes intention. It becomes something a little more tangible, a little more real. If you just keep it all in here and you just think it and you never actually speak it or you never actually alchemize it onto pen and paper, then it just remains up here. And like you said, you'll get what you settle for, what you're not changing, you are choosing. And a lot of that has to do with getting really, really clear on what you want, fearlessly clear on what you want, and not being afraid to put it down on paper. I think a lot of people are afraid to put it down on paper because they don't want to be disappointed. They don't want to write down the dream life because they're going to be like, well, when it doesn't happen, I'm going to feel so sad. But I can guarantee if you can't even see it, you can't allow yourself to dream it, you can't allow yourself to write it, you'll never fucking see it anyway. So what have you got to lose? Right? Do it. Put it down. Get fearlessly clear on what you want and know what you are worth. Know what you value. Know your level of respect and don't settle. Just don't settle for anything in life. Only settle for what you genuinely feel is a good energy exchange and is matched to you.
Absolutely, brother. I'm on the same page. I feel like when you write it out, you are bringing it physically into this realm. So out of the mind and onto paper. All right. So just to wrap this one up, man, I always love your input. Thank you so much for joining me again on this podcast, brother. 5 tips for men to really step up their game. What would you say they would be? I know the physicality would be one of them. Strength.
Yeah. I would say so, like coming back to this idea of like microdosing monk mode, I would say stop drinking. I know this seems like a controversial one sometimes, but just give yourself a finite amount of time and stop drinking. I've done this a couple of times in my life. When my wife got pregnant with the first baby, I was like, I'm going to stop drinking with her. She can't drink, right? 8 months, no drinking. It's so good for your productivity and your values. And it's not that drinking will get in the way of your self-improvement necessarily, but it will cost you a day or two per week where you don't have the ability to dive deeper into that. So it becomes a hindrance. So mine would be like a lot of these little challenges, like stop drinking for 90 days, see what happens. Start a combat sport. Start either jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, or boxing, or start to become dangerous but not a danger. Do some physical hand-to-hand combat, do some firearms training, or become competent in something that feels more of like a necessity survival skill. Like learn how to change the oil in a car and change a tire and start a wildfire and learn how to hunt or trap or something like that. It'll give you an immense feeling of pride and purpose because we feel good when we're making progress. So definitely, do something like that. 3, curate your environment. Decide who you want to be around and go and actually plunk yourself in there. If this is about a romantic partner, writing it down again, getting clear on who is that person? What do they look like? What do they do? Who are they? All of it. Get it as clear as you can. And then say, cool, where do they hang out? Oh, I'm not gonna find them in the bar at 2 o'clock on a Saturday night. I'm probably gonna find them in the yoga studio or in the park for the drum circle or in the CrossFit gym, and go put yourself in those places. Take back, number 4 would be take back your wasted time, your scroll hole, your video gaming, your endless just watching of movies and Netflix. You don't have to take it all back, but practice like an 80-20 kind of exchange here. Take 80% of it back, reserve 20% for checking out and watching a fucking comedy or whatever, and reinvest that 80% into self-development. This will buy you up a lot more time to either read books, listen to podcasts, create something, start a YouTube channel, go to the gym a little bit more, go even just fucking take a walk if that's it. And what should we do? Last but not least, let me see. This will be a big one. I've said all my good ones. I'd have to come back to like, I would look at physical health again now from just an area we haven't touched on. I would say like sort your diet out for a little bit. See how you feel when you fix the inputs coming into your bloody gob, and what I'd say there is to, again, microdose monk mode, pick a time frame. What's usually powerful enough for somebody to see how impactful this is 30 days. Commit to 30 days with no refined sugar, no ultra processed food. So like nothing that comes out of boxes and is shelf stable for months on end, no refined crappy sugar. Just try to limit eating out as much as possible. If not, say, I'm only going to eat home cooked food. Because even if you just did that, if you just ate home cooked food, you're 80% better off than you were before. And now try to go for the food that nature provides. I say jerf it up. Just eat real food. Eat meat and eggs and, things that grow on trees or grow from the ground or fell off a tree or came out of the ocean. Eat protein. You're hopefully moving as well. Eat fruit and vegetables if they feel good for you, and limit the bullshit. Just try 30 days of eating real food that's more ancestrally appropriate. Think about what your ancestors would eat and all of that stuff. That could be the catalyst that change everything, because you're going to find out that, oh shit, I've always had these pimples and they went away. Oh man, I was farting all day and I've stopped farting, and I've got energy and I want to work out now. And oh shit, I actually kind of look better too. Look, there's a little pectoral muscle under there somewhere. And that will give you confidence. I say this, and there's an important thing to understand. Motivation rarely precedes action. You're not going to find motivation before the action. You can find discipline. You can just decide to do something, but motivation comes after the action. You can create a motivation upward spiral by taking action, because you'll feel good about the action that you take. And the action is the only way to derive any kind of meaningful result. The result will become self-motivating because you'll be proud of what you're seeing and who you are when you look in the mirror. And then you can ride this upward spiral of motivation infinitely. And guess what? When it fucks off, which it will sometimes, you can always fall back on being the disciplined person. Because motivation is doing what you want when you want to do it, which is awesome. If you have it, ride that wave. But discipline is doing what you want even when you don't want to do it. And if you're going to become a very high value man that can be on this self-development game forever until you check out, you need to become disciplined. But through becoming disciplined, you'll actually also become more motivated. But you won't be motivated until you actually do anything. So go get out there. And like you said, James, self-development, reading books and all that stuff is good. but action will create more confidence and clarity than any amount of books will ever do. So ruthless action, ruthless action, ruthless fucking action.
Ruthless, messy action.
Ruthless, messy action. Yes.
Nah, absolutely love it, man. So we got stop drinking, which I agree. Doesn't really help anything out. And I would actually add stop drinking and nutrition. I would put those as like the first two because it's going to make everything better.
Yeah.
You're going to start thinking better. You start feeling better. Noticeable differences in pretty much things that you weren't even aware about before.
Yeah.
So yeah, just eat real food. Take back your time and fight. Curate your environment. Fight. Be able to me, men need to be able to express violence. That's using it and be dangerous. Or say it again.
Yeah, you got it. Be dangerous, but not a danger.
Not a danger. There we go. Awesome, brother. Well, Steve, I want to thank you so much again for your time, brother.
Yes.
Great, valuable information here. Stuff that I think all youth need. And where we already said this in the first episode, but where can people find you?
Yeah, so my channel, which I'm most active and will lead you to everything else that you need to find, is at Peak Primal Health on Instagram. And there you'll see just, the usual content and some hopefully continued helpful tips and advice. I will say, shameless plug, that I do offer coaching programs that center very much on this work of holistic self-development, getting your mind, body, and soul right, men's work. I also do some coaching and consulting for online coaches and aspiring online coaches. And my latest endeavor, which we started the podcast with, is also another podcast on, it's called Radical Health Radio, and it's in partnership with Heart and Soil. And we do live caller shows every week where people call in and get their questions answered. And we focus again on holistic health, bring in some cool guests. So you can check that out wherever podcasts are found and also on YouTube. So Peak Primal Health on Instagram and Radical Health Radio on YouTube channels. Booyah.
Sweet. I will leave those in the show notes. And you also have a retreat coming up in July, no? That's a men's.
Yes. Yeah, there's a men's work retreat. Very good reminder that is in July in Tulum. And it's actually with a mentor of mine. That he was a mentor of mine for years, and it's kind of come full circle. And I've kind of became his ally in this work now as well. So that's in Tulum. It's a week, I believe. I need to get better at my dates, but I believe it's July 17th to the 24th-ish. It's in a beautiful private villa. We'll be doing this kind of work every day, these safe spaces that we were talking about to dive in. And we'll also be doing breath work and meditation. And we'll be getting temazcal out there because that's the land that we're in. Just private food, delicious, privately curated by a chef. And then we have another retreat, which is not for the faint of heart, but this is in the first week of June. This is with another partner of mine, Ryan, and we're doing a vision quest. So we talked about those rites of passage. Vision quest or vision fast is a very ancient rite of passage that's been practiced by many indigenous cultures kind of world over. And it's you go out on your own into nature with no food, no water, no phone, no comfort. And you survive alone 3 days and 3 nights to pray for a vision, to fast for a vision, to see why you're really here and can you connect with your potential and what really matters to you. So that's first week of June. We've got the men's work retreat in July. And last but not least, closing out the year, we've got a retreat in November in Guatemala at Lake Atitlan, which is co-ed. It's mixed women and men. 20 spots available for that. That's, holistic self-development. Again, lots of playing on the beach, lots of breath work, meditation, self-development, fighting, screaming, all of it. It's fun.
Awesome, man. It sounds amazing. Yeah, we should have touched a little bit more on the rite of passage, but I'll leave that to people too. Yeah, you want to talk about it a little bit? Let's go. We can edit and scratch this up a little bit. So, what would your rite of passage look like today for the modern man?
That's a very good question. I think a rite of passage is an initiation, and an initiation, the way I define it, is when everything that you believed yesterday is no longer true today. And that means that you've kind of got to put yourself into something that is earth-shattering, because it's basically going to make you question the entirety of who you are, what you thought life was, and where you're going. Now, that sounds quite dramatic, but it's very empowering too, because it gives you the freedom from your past, the freedom from, life is this way and I'm destined for this. Because if you can question all of that by going through some chosen adversity or a deep, vision quest or a darkness retreats, those are becoming popular now, or a ceremony of sorts, or there's so many ways to do this. Like there's again ancient cultures of practice, all kinds of stuff. The sun dance is very popular. The vision fasts are extremely popular. There's many ways you can be thrust into a initiation process, even if you don't choose it. Like fatherhood is quite an initiation process, I'll tell you, but I don't think you want to get into that one without a lot of intention. So make sure you're ready for it. But I've kind of been all over the map, and I've had several of these, and these can just be long fasts, and that's how you can kind of get your foot in the door. You could do a long fast, or you could do 30-day challenge where you really push yourself physically. You could do, you could go on retreat. You could do all kinds of stuff, man. My real first initiation was actually initiated through psychedelic ceremony, working with psilocybin mushrooms, because it was exactly that. It forced me to, when I was integrating, to go like, damn, literally everything I thought about life, who I was, the world, spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, changed in that moment. Everything I thought that was true about life yesterday is no longer true today. And that's kind of like a whoa space of, wow, I can become anything or do anything because I'm no longer tied to all of this stuff. So I don't know how you necessarily get there. There are options, and history has lots of these embedded in. And our retreats and things like that can open up those doors. But that's the feeling you're going for with an initiation. It's like oh shit, like a holy shit, wow, okay. Everything is different now. The fundamental way I see the world and the way I see myself is different. And if you can accomplish that, you've been on a rite of passage. You've grown up, you've become a little more full into who you are. And maybe you need to go on a few of those over life, maybe one's not enough, but maybe you get them at different points in your life. And that's certainly been the case for me. Like I said, at that moment, I was 25 years old, and then becoming a dad was another one, and there's just many along the way, because life is ceremony in a sense. So seek it out, choose adversity, choose to face yourself, choose to go into stillness and remove yourself from the world, because there's a lot of wisdom that sits with you.
That's exactly what I would say. It pretty much just shatters your entire world. The way that you viewed the world, you now have an entirely different lens, and once that happens, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So things change.
Yes, exactly.
Ever. And I guess the last question that I would ask is, what does it feel like to you what does it feel like coming out of it? If that makes sense.
It's both scary and exciting, I would say. And I think that scary and exciting thing is a little recipe for success in some ways, that if it's not scary, it's too inside your comfort zone. If it's not exciting, it's too inside your comfort zone. And if it's only scary without any shred of excitement, you're just going to be paralyzed by fear. So simultaneously, in that space of awe, basically, and being humbled by life, you are a little bit afraid, because you now start to see a little more truth of, hey, you got to stop playing small and you've really got to show up. But that's also very empowering and exciting too, because it means, oh, I get to stop playing small. You kind of realize that the universe is quite ruthless in terms of how little of a fuck it gives about you. In the grand scheme of the entirety of life, you are but a blip on this cosmic giggle, and no one will even remember you 100 years from now. And that can be like, holy shit, that's scary. But it can also be incredibly empowering too, because it's like, if nobody gives a fuck and the world doesn't give a fuck, then I can and should become all that I could be, because I'm all in this game. I'm all in. I'm not getting out alive. Nobody is. So if I'm all in, why not go all in? Why not play the game? Like, it is a beautiful game that we've been given. It's got real supervillains and delicious food and sex and challenges, and we can play with this meat suit and get it stronger and all that stuff, man. Like, just go all in. That's what it feels like to me when I have those moments. It's like, all right, you were playing small in this arena. Time to step it up. Time to go again. Learn who you are again. And that will break down again another few years from now and another. But just being willing to embrace those beliefs shattering so new things can open up. I think that's what it's all about, man.
Yeah, brother. It feels like butterflies to me.
Yeah.
And I think the last little bit that I would think about when you die and people are at your funeral, what would they say about you? And who are the people that are going to be at your funeral? Do you really give a fuck? You're already dead.
Yeah, no, I don't really. I don't. I guess I don't really. I wouldn't care because I'm certainly gone. I have an interesting take on death because a part of that like rite of passage initiation thing is, like die before you die almost, and what that allows is a freedom of the fear of death. Because why be fearful of something that is as natural as being born that everybody goes through? And if there's one thing we know about death is that it's absolutely safe. So from that perspective, I'm not too bothered. But I would like to think that what people would say about me at my funeral would be that I am the person that I said I was, that I was a real one, that I stayed true to myself. I always spoke my truth. I always followed my heart, and I tried the best and hopefully accomplished in many ways of leaving people, places, and things better than I found them. So I hope that's what they say when I'm gone. And when I'm gone, yeah, hopefully the world's a slightly, like maybe 0.1% better place because of my presence and hopefully helping other people do that as well.
I think you're doing it, brother. I really do.
Trying, man.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, brother. I will let you know when this is out, and I will include all of your retreats and everything in the show notes.
Awesome. All good, brother. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm excited. And yeah, I'm sure we'll run it back again for round 3 at some point in the future. Been a pleasure.
I would love that.
Sweet.
Peace, man. God bless.
I'll
All right.
see you later, mate.
Later, man.
Bye.